Remember back in chapter 19 learning about the heart, and you learned about the two circuits, the pulmonary and the systemic? The pulmonary circuit is the right side of the heart, sends deoxygenated blood to the lungs. The blood gets oxygen, then it goes to the left side of the heart. And it's pulmonary veins that carry that oxygenated blood to the left side of the heart. So right here and right here, we have pulmonary veins. Okay, then you also have the systemic circuit. It is the left side of the heart, sends oxygenated blood to the body. This is how you nourish your cells. Then that deoxygenated blood, after it gives the oxygen to your cells, comes back to the right side of the heart. So remember that whole figure 8 thing. So you have, here's the right side of your heart, right here, and it sends the blood up through the pulmonary trunk to the pulmonary arteries, through your lungs where it picks up oxygen, then through the pulmonary veins to the left side of the heart. Then the left side of the heart receives that oxygenated blood. It sends it up to the aorta, which branches into systemic arteries, which we learned those in chapter 20. You go through the systemic capillaries where you give oxygen to the cells. Down here also. Then the deoxygenated blood comes back through the vena cava into the right side of the heart. Now, also remember from chapter 19, we talked about coronary circulation. So here is that picture of those coronary arteries. Okay, remember these? They branch from the aorta and they take oxygenated blood to the heart. So even though the heart is full of blood, it's not being nourished by the blood that's inside of it to get pumped. You have these arteries on the surface of the heart that are nourishing it. And because they're delivering oxygenated blood to cells and they're branching off the aorta, this is part of the systemic circuit. Okay, now think about your lungs in the same way as the heart. There's all this pulmonary blood in your lungs. So we can see here your lungs are full of pulmonary blood. But this blood is there to pick up oxygen. So your lungs are full of pulmonary circuit blood. But this blood is there to pick up oxygen. It is not nourishing the lungs. So just like your heart is not nourished by the blood that's in it to be pumped, your lungs are not nourished by the blood that's in there to pick up oxygen. And your heart has coronary circulation, which is parasystemic, to nourish it. Well, the same thing happens with your lungs. You have what's called bronchial circulation. This is part of your systemic circuit. So if it's parasystemic, that means it is oxygenated blood that is there to nourish your lungs. And it gives oxygen to your lungs. So there's actually two sets of blood in your lungs. There's the blood that is part of the pulmonary circuit that is just there to get oxygen. And it is from the right side of the heart, and it will go through the pulmonary veins to the left side of the heart. Then you have the bronchial circulation. This is blood that is there to give oxygen to your lungs. This blood is from the left side of the heart, and it went through the aorta. We look at this picture, you can see here is that pulmonary artery, right here, pulmonary artery. This is what's part of the pulmonary circuit. It is coming from the right side of the heart. And see, this blood is full of carbon dioxide. It goes through the pulmonary capillaries. It gets oxygen. And now here it is in the pulmonary vein going to the left side of the heart. Okay, then that other set of blood is right here. Bronchial artery, and notice from the aorta. So this is oxygenated blood of the systemic circuit. It is there going to your lungs, and here you can see it gives oxygen to your lungs. And then, now normally, systemic circuit blood would go back to the right side of the heart through a vena cava. But notice this, instead, it jumps into that pulmonary vein. So this is kind of a little cheat. So right here, this blood should take a vena cava to the right atrium, because that's what systemic blood does after it has given oxygen. But instead, it does this little cheat, and it just goes into the pulmonary vein with the oxygenated blood to the left atrium. So if you follow the path of this blood, it would be in the aorta, so it's in the left ventricle. It's oxygenated, it gets pumped into the aorta, it goes into bronchial circulation, it comes down here to your bronchial artery through the bronchial capillaries, it gives oxygen to the blood, it gives oxygen to the lung cells. Then it's deoxygenated systemic blood, and it goes into the pulmonary vein and back to the left atrium again. So it's kind of an odd little path there, but that is how you nourish your lungs. Now let's look at partial pressure and gas exchange. So we know that the atmospheric pressure is 760 millimeters of mercury. Okay, we talked about millimeters of mercury back when we covered blood pressure. It's the same idea. You have a tube with a bulb. There's mercury, Hg stands for mercury, and air pressure pushes on the bulb. This makes the mercury rise up in the tube, and then you just use a ruler and you measure how many millimeters it goes up. So the higher the air pressure, the more intense the air pressure, the further it pushes the mercury up that tube. So 760 is just an average. It actually varies. If you go up on top of a mountain, the number is lower. It also varies with the weather. So like on bright sunny days versus rainy days, you have differences in air pressure. But we're just going to use the average of 760. Okay. Then if we talk about partial pressure, air is a mixture of gases. Each gas contributes to that total pressure. So partial pressure is how much is contributed by one individual gas, and we can just abbreviate it pp. So if you look at this picture, we have gas number 1 here, the blue dots, and here is its pressure of 1. Here's gas number 2, the green dots, and it has a pressure of 2. And when you put them together, you get a pressure of 3. Okay, if we look at the air that you're breathing, the air you're breathing is mostly made of nitrogen, oxygen, water vapor, and carbon dioxide. Nitrogen is the biggest part of air. Nitrogen is 78.6% of the air you're breathing. Oxygen is next. Oxygen is 20.9%. Water vapor is 0.46%, and carbon dioxide is 0.04%. So that is the air you're breathing. If we take those percentages and make them into partial pressure, so we know that total pressure is 760. So then we just want to know the partial pressure of each. Well, all you do is multiply. If we know the total pressure is 760, and we know that nitrogen is 78.6% of that, we just take 78.6% of 760, and that comes out to 597. If we take 20.9% of 760, we get that oxygen has a partial pressure of 159. Water vapor is 3.5, and carbon dioxide is 0.3. So now notice this column says atmosphere. So this is the air you breathe. This is what is in the room around you. The next column is alveoli. This is the air in your lungs. Okay, so the air you breathe and the air in your lungs is actually a little bit different from each other. We're only going to worry about oxygen and carbon dioxide here because those are the gases you're exchanging. The partial pressure of oxygen for the air in your lungs is 104, and for carbon dioxide is 40. So I want to explain the difference in these numbers. If you just going to focus on oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay, the air that's right in front of your face right now has a partial pressure of 159 for oxygen and 0.3 for carbon dioxide. You take a breath in. Now that air is in your lungs, and that very same air suddenly changes to 104 and 40. The reason for that is you never completely empty your lungs. When you take a breath in, so you have air comes in, goes down all the way down here until your alveoli. Then you exhale, and that air starts going back out. Not all of it makes it out. You always have residual volume. So this is the air that is still in your lungs and your airways after you exhale. Okay, think about drinking from a straw. You're at the movies, you have your drink, and there's that last little bit of soda you can never quite get out, right? Also, if you think about when you drink through the straw, you go to take a sip, the soda starts moving up the straw. You have some that gets up here into the straw, and then you stop drinking. Well, this stuff falls back down into your cup. That's how your lungs are. For one thing, you always have some air in your lungs. You can never completely empty your lungs. For another thing, when you exhale, there's going to be some air that, say, makes it to this point. And then you stop exhaling and you start inhaling again. Well, the air right there at that point then gets sucked back in. Think of it like a bathtub. Say you have your bath water. Then you start to drain the tub. But before the tub is completely empty, you plug it up and refill it. Now, your next bath is a mixture of the old water and the fresh water. That's what happens when you breathe. This is the fresh water or the fresh air you breathe in. But then it gets in your lungs and it mixes with the old air from your last breath. So that is why the oxygen in your lungs is lower than the oxygen in the air, and the carbon dioxide in your lungs is higher than the carbon dioxide in the air. With every breath, you mix fresh air with old air. And so this reduces the oxygen and raises the carbon dioxide. So now we know that in your lungs we have 104 for oxygen and 40 for carbon dioxide. Now let's see what goes on with the gas exchange. So in this picture, this part is the air. And this is the blood. Okay, so we know that oxygen is 104, and we know that carbon dioxide is 40. Okay, now notice the direction of blood flow. Here's our arrow. Blood is flowing this way. So on the left, we have the old deoxygenated blood from the body. The level of oxygen is 40. So this is blood that has already given oxygen to the cells. So its oxygen level is down to a partial pressure of 40. Now also, when you give oxygen to cells, you pick up carbon dioxide. So we have 45 for carbon dioxide. Now we do diffusion. So think back to chapter 4. Oxygen and carbon dioxide move by diffusion. So you're going to move high to low until equal. Okay, so oxygen is 104 in the air. It's 40 in your blood. You're going to move high to low. So here you can see the oxygen arrow. Oxygen is going to move from the air into your blood. Now, here's the part you have to think about. Let's say there's an oxygen molecule right here, and it moves into your blood. Well, that leaves an empty space here when it moves. You're not just going to leave that space empty. The next oxygen that was right here will move up to take its space. So now you have an empty space there. So then the next one right here moves up to take its space. And the next one moves up to take its space. You just keep having them move up to take each other's spaces. See here in his face? Here that is. Follow this arrow. It's going through his nose all the way down like this. Each oxygen just keeps moving up to take the other's space. So that means that you start with 104. One of them moves into the blood. You would be down to 103 now. But instead, each one keeps moving up to take the place of the one before it. So the 104 never actually drops. It just stays 104. So we're going to have oxygen move into the blood. But the amount of oxygen in the lung stays consistent because it just keeps moving in to take the place. Now, if you were to close your mouth and plug your nose, then this wouldn't happen and the amount of oxygen would actually drop. But as long as you have that open airway all the way down like this, each one is just going to keep moving in to take the place of the other. So if the 104 never drops and diffusion goes until we're equal, that means we're going to equalize at 104. So the blood here, after it has exchanged with your lung, is 104. The same idea happens with carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is going to move this way. So we have 40 carbon dioxides. One of them, one comes in. Well, this one that comes in has to bump the guy ahead of him. So he bumps him up, and that bumps the guy ahead of him and bumps him up, which bumps the one ahead of him. And they just keep bumping each other up all the way out your nose. So if you look here, see there's that arrow? Now let's look at what happens once you get out to the cells. In this picture, we have your cells. So this is systemic, and here is the direction of blood flow. It's going this way. So where we left off here, this blood comes down here. Now, one thing that is going to be different is the oxygen here is 95 instead of 104. So we have something to figure out. You have blood up here leaving the lungs and going to the left side of the heart at 104. But then when it arrives at your cells, it is 95. So what happened in between is that bronchial circulation. Remember this picture we looked at before? You have the systemic bronchial circulation. This is the blood that gives oxygen to your lung cells. Here we have the pulmonary circulation. So this is that pulmonary blood in your pulmonary vein that has just picked up oxygen. This is where we have 104. But because it mixes with this pulmonary blood right here that has just given, or I'm sorry, the systemic blood right here that has just given blood to your lung cells, it switches to 95. You dilute that oxygen down. Okay, so back to here. Your carbon dioxide is 40 because it's the blood leaving the lungs coming out here. Now we're going to exchange with the cells. In your cells, the oxygen level is 40 and the carbon dioxide level is 45. This is a constant. Your cells stay at 40 for oxygen and 45 for the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. This is because making ATP is constant. So you're going to give oxygen to your cells. So oxygen is going to go this way. And remember, it's going to diffuse until it's equal, but it's going to equal out at 40. That is because as you give oxygen to your cells, they use it. It's kind of like giving a dog a treat. If I give my dog one treat, he eats one. If I give him 5 treats, he eats 5. However much oxygen you give your cells, they use. The carbon dioxide is going to move into the blood because it's going to diffuse high to low. But we're going to equal out at 45. That's because cells make carbon dioxide at the same rate you remove it. So we're giving the cells oxygen, we're picking up their carbon dioxide, but the numbers in the cells don't change, only the blood changes. Now we're ready to repeat. So then this is the blood that goes to the right side of the heart, which pumps it to the lungs, and there we are, back to the 40 and 45 that we started with in the lungs. So that is how the gas exchange occurs between, you have external respiration is the one up here. That's between your blood and the air in your lungs. And this is internal respiration between your cells and the blood.